אז בוקר טוב לכולם וברוכים השבים ליום השני לוועידה השנתית לבריאות הנפש של ישראל מבית קולקטיב עיקר. יפה, נו, תעירו קצת, תעירו. יפה מאוד. תודה. טוב, זה לא יקרה, אבל אני יודע מה אתה רוצה. אז אתמול עסקנו בהבנת תמונת המצב הלאומית בהתמודדות עם תהליך הריפוי. היום נשים פעמנו לבחינת הזירה הגלובלית והטכנולוגית. נקבל תמונת מצב על חדשנות. אדוני ליצן רפואי, אתה מסתיר לי את הפרומפטר. אז היום נקבל תמונת מצב על חדשנות בעולמות הריפוי הקונבנציונלי והטבעי. נזכה להצצה על עולם הריפוי מפרספקטיבה גלובלית, ובעיקר נבין כיצד כלים טכנולוגיים מבוססי AI, המילה האהובה עליי, עתידים לשנות את המציאות. על כך ועוד נשמע בהמשך מפי מומחים. ועכשיו אני ממש שמח ומתכבד להזמין את גילה טולוב, שותפה ומייסדת ומנכ"לית עמותת קולקטיב עיקר, לסיכום אירועי האתמול ופתיחת יומה השני והמאוד מאוד משובח של הוועדה. גילה, בבקשה.
Hello, Boker Tov. Thanks to everybody who's back. Thanks for everybody who's here for the first day. And because not everyone was here yesterday, I will start with a recap of what we've done yesterday, so you know where you come in. So yesterday, I want to share that we started with MK Yaron Levy, who came on stage and very courageously spoke about his own anxiety and how he got into the field of mental health, which made a big difference for the rest of the day because it was a very courageous thing to do all the way at the beginning, especially for an MK, and that really set the tone for the day. After a few opening remarks and a presentation of the goals of ICAR, we had a panel on the state of trauma healing in Israel, which was quite intense, which was nice. We heard a lot about education and children and the need to think about this generation that has gone through Corona and now, is going through the war. And they're really, the soldiers of tomorrow. Then we moved into thinking about the future. What does the strategy look like? And even though Israelis thrive on crisis and emergency response, I hate to break it to you, but emergency response is not a strategy. So we spoke about the fact that now might be the time to design something for the future. And we had a great bunch of speakers to start to talk about what we can do to accelerate healing. And I was glad to hear a lot of people talk about the fact that we need to work together. In the afternoon, we had two kind of panels. The first one was about the Retzef Tipuli, the continuum of care. So people had to choose between 4 sessions, one on psychoeducation, primary prevention, one was how do you create a trauma-informed society, and then we spoke about rehabilitation, and we also had a session on diversity and inclusion. And what came out of this session is a lot about, the whole family, the fact that it's not only about one person. When there is a traumatic event, it influences everyone. There was also a lot of talk about the need for easier access to care. Right now, when you have too many choices, it's hard. And, the women from the forum, Nashot Miluimnikim, spoke about that, they would love, all the women would love to know, where am I supposed to go? Who do I ask if I need help? We had a little bit more optimism than last year, I feel. So maybe today we'll continue on that note. A few people, including Itzik Saadian, who spoke about his own experience, reminded us that from crisis we can all grow, and that there is something hidden in here, even if we can't see it right now because it's early and we're all still processing, there is growth that could come from it. We spoke about AI and digital with a little bit of a discussion on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, people are ready or not ready. I think to me the conclusion is anyways it's coming. So even if we're not ready, we better get ready. And we know that teenagers are already using AI and replacing us. So we need to know what they want to use. We spoke about the fact that 1 in 4 people are actually caregivers. I don't know if you realized, I didn't realize that it was so many, but 1 in 4 people in the workplace are caring for someone else. And most of them, 60% of them, do not say that on the workplace. They're worried people will look at them in the hallway with more pity in their eyes, or they're worried they won't get a promotion because no one, will trust them. And in the diversity session, we spoke a lot about the power of community and the fact that a strong community is really an anchor for everyone. And, it can serve as a prevention almost for other issues. So a lot of things came out. In the evening, we had experiential sessions that people could join. One on the science of hope. Thank you, Ben and Dvorah for this session. We had one on writing as a tool for healing, and one about the Jewish Project from Anu Museum. We just got a taste, and they were excellent. So if any of you want to bring this to your organizations, let us know, and we'll be happy to share. One thing that we also did, so yesterday, one of the first things that Eyal presented was a baseline. Where are we? Let's align on where we are before we talk about what could be, what should be. It's easy to have a lot of opinions, especially when we don't have data. And so we shared a few numbers, but before we did that in the morning, we actually interviewed people as they were coming in and asked them some of these questions. How many therapists do you think, how many psychiatrists do you think there are for children? So we wanted to show you that video, and Eyal will then, Yeah, exactly. All right.
אז הסרט.
Half of the 1,000 in total.
אני מניחה שלפחות 50%, זה קשוח.
וואו, 10,000, 15,000.
אני אומרת 0. אני מניפסטיישן, אין לי מושג.
חצי לפחות. יש מאות אלפי מילואימניקים, אז אני מניח שלפחות 50,000 זוגות בישראל.
וואי, בטח 40%. 10,000.
50,000.
להכיר בליצנות רפואית כחלק ממקצועות הבריאות ולשלב אותנו איפה שרק אפשר, כי אנחנו התרופה הכי טובה.
הדחיפות היא על נושא החיילים והמלחמה, וכמובן גם השבויים והפצועים. זה הקו הראשון.
מה שהכנס עושה, להביא את הידע, להתכנס ביחד, להבין דברים חדשים ולהתאגד. עם כמה שיותר שהטכנולוגיה תבוא עם המטפלים, אינטגרציה.
אני חושב שזה התמיכה במי שתומך ביום יום. בני המשפחה המטפלים בישראל הם עמוד השדרה האזרחי. בלי בני משפחה מטפלים אין אפשרות לעשות שום דבר. לא הייטק, לא מלחמה, לא צבא, לא ממשלה, כלום.
Making more room for more therapists to join the table and making more room for breakthrough treatments that are not being as easily regulated as they could be and spread out in a much faster way.
To bring people who want to make Aliyah and come to Israel. I specifically work for an organization that specializes in Olim. There are very highly trained therapists who are eager to come and help, and they want to come here, and the hurdles have to be removed and make it easier for them to come and help right away.
סיוע לישראלים שנקלעים למצבי משבר על רקע נפשי בחוץ לארץ.
להכיר בזה שיש לנו אירוע לאומי, להקצות משאבים למערכת בריאות נפש רעבה, ולשים על סדר היום חדשנות, מענים שנותנים אפשרויות מגוונות, כל המתמודדים באשר הם.
Helping these people, mapping out the ecosystem, seeing what's actually going on.
חייבים לכל מי שצריך עזרה, וגם כל מי שלא יודע לפנות עדיין, יגיע אליהם בכל דרך אפשרית, גם אם זה לא לשבת אחד על אחד לפסיכולוג, דרך כלשהי טיפול. אם לא, זה יהיה מדינה ופוסט-טראומה פשוט טורפת.
וואו, החיים יפים, השמש זורחת כל יום, והשקיעות, מה זה יפות? זאת הסיבה להישאר בחיים.
אז שימו תודה כל יום, על כל מה שיש ועל כל מה שעוד יהיה.
כל יואו. תראה איזה כאילו זה עשה לי שקט השאלה הזו. באמת הכל, חיים עצמם, כל מה שקורה מסביבנו, קורים דברים טובים.
אנחנו אנשים טובים, זה מה שאנחנו שומעים בסוף. וזה שאכפת לנו, ואנחנו ביום כזה לוקחים יום מהחיים, אנחנו עוסקים בזה ביום יום. היום לקחנו יום די אוף מלעשות את מה שאנחנו עושים כדי להיפגש רגע ולראות מי עוד עושה. וכשאתה פוגש, אתה מקבל עוד כוחות לעשות את הדבר הזה.
יש המון סיבות להישאר חיוביים, אבל אני מגיעה הנה לכנס ואני רואה המון אנשים נפגשים, מדברים סביב נושא לא פשוט וכאוב, וכולם מאוד מאוד אכפת, אין מישהו שאתה מדבר איתו שלא מרגישים עליו איך זה בוער בו לנסות לעשות את הדברים טוב יותר, נכון יותר, וזה מחמם את הלב, כי בסוף, אחרי טראומה, אנשים צריכים אנשים.
לעשות איזשהו פיץ' לעמותת הגל שלי, שעושים גלישה ציבורית לנפגעי השביעי לאוקטובר ופצועים ונער בסיכון, שזה עוזר להפחית את האחוזים של פיתוח PTSD.
I think if I look around this room and seeing all the people that are willing to help and ready to help, I think there's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of different people here who need a lot of different help, and there's a lot of people here who are willing to help. So connecting the people who need it with the people who are giving it, the sooner we do that, the better.
סיבה להישאר חיוביים? יש מחר.
Because we have a future and we're headed towards somewhere. Yeah, if we don't stay positive, we can't build that future.
אז בוקר טוב ליום השני. התשובות אגב, למי שמתעניין, זה שיש לנו במדינת ישראל כ-300 פסיכיאטרים של הילד והמתבגר. זה יפה כי יו"ר האיגוד לפסיכיאטריה של המתבגר מדבר על 220, המספרים הרשמיים נעים סביב ה-300, ובכל מקרה התור כרגע לפסיכיאטר, לטיפול פסיכולוגי או אחר אחרי אינטייק, הוא 6.5 חודשים בממוצע במערכת הציבורית, ובערך שליש מהאנשים ששאלו אותם מה מונע מהם לפנות לטיפול זה התור הארוך. ובאשר לגירושים אז 50% באמת מתקשים, אבל שליש מדברים על, כ-30% מדברים על גירושים בצורה רצינית, מה שבאמת מספרים איומים ונוראים. ואם ככה שואלים מה מביא בכל זאת את הנקודה האופטימית, אז אני יכול להגיד שאתמול פגשנו מלא אנשים נורא טובים. ואני נורא שמח שאתם פה, ואני נורא שמח שאנחנו מתחילים את היום השני. ויש לנו הרבה דברים משותפים. כולנו רוצים לעשות יותר טוב בסיטואציה באמת לא פשוטה שיש לכולנו. באשר למה משרד הבריאות צריך לעשות? וואלה, זה כולם. כל מה שהם אמרו נכון, מהליצנות הרפואית ועד בכלל. כן, וגילה תציג את
היום הזה, today. So today we move to innovation and the future of healing. So in the morning we'll have a session in English that will bring experts, global experts, to share with us what they've seen in other areas. We know that it's very hard to imagine that anyone has been through what we've been through, and every situation is different, but there are things that we can learn even as Israelis. Then we'll hear from the tribe of Nova, and hear where they are right now, because I think a lot of us, know what happened to them, but not all of us know where they are right now and how they're doing. And at the end of the morning, we'll have a discussion around research and what is the research that Israel could be doing, should be doing, and how, do we create that agenda for what research to do. Again, so it's not up to luck, but actually up to something we could think about proactively. And this afternoon we have another 4 sessions on innovative ways to think about trauma. One will be about nature-based therapies. So for all of you that are curious about this, you could go to that session. One is going to be on technology and AI. This one's going to be in English. One is going to be on pharmacological innovation. So you'll talk about MDMA, SGB, psilocybin, ketamine, etc. And one is going to be about all the behavioral health aspect of trauma, right? So how it moves to physical health, also addiction, eating disorders, suicide. And so this is going to be another really interesting session. After that, we have a very exciting new initiative that will bring together on-stage collaborations. We wanted to hear from everyone in the room, but we wanted to celebrate the people that are actually creating collaborations that make possible something that would not have been possible without the collaboration. So we'll have forums that you can choose from. It's going to be really hard, but you have to choose between, solutions that are more about treatment, solutions that are more about community and municipalities. So look at your agendas and go to these sessions, and there'll be a link as well so you can send feedback to all the presenters, and we can celebrate them and also inspire the next generation of collaborations. So thank you. Have a great day.
אוקיי, אז בעוד כדקה אנחנו נתחיל את הפאנל הראשון שלנו להיום בנושא טראומה, הילינג, ריפוי מטראומה, תובנות מרחבי העולם, בהנחיית דוקטור אלכסנדרה קליין. הפאנל יתקיים באנגלית. רגע לפני שאני מזמין את אלכסנדרה, את דוקטור קליין, אני אפרד מכם. אני הולך לעשות את עבודתי החדשותית, כי מישהו צריך לייצר פוסט טראומה משנית. אז תודה רבה, נעמתם לי מאוד. ואתם עושים כולכם עבודת קודש, תודה רבה על זה. דוקטור קליין, the stage is yours. תודה.
Hello, we'll start in English now. I'm actually moderating the panel, so I think you can all come up and I'll slowly ease us into our morning. Anywhere that looks comfortable. That's it, we are. So welcome everyone. I'll say a few words just to give you an overview. We have one short hour with an amazing panel where each question we ask could easily be a conference on its own. So with that in mind, we're going to keep it as structured as possible. I'm going to, in a minute, read to you a text that I sent the panel just last week to kind of think about, to absorb, and think about a response. And then I'll introduce them gradually with some targeted questions based on their own expertise and wisdom. A few ground rules to start with. What we asked of the panelists is to, as much as possible, bring theory to action. As Gila just mentioned, today is thinking towards the future. And unfortunately, we won't have time for questions because we have a lot to say and we really want to hear them. But I'm volunteering them to be around throughout the day, over coffee, over lunch, if you'd like to follow up and ask them more questions. Okay, so this most distinguished panel brings together international and local expertise on collective trauma training and healing. We're here to examine how different contexts shape policy and practice and what Israel can learn from such global experiences. Our speakers offer perspectives that move in both directions. International ideas applied locally and local experiences shared globally. They represent a vast, interconnected world where words and perspectives travel quickly. In that sense, what we'll be doing is in this next hour is an active translation, not only between languages, but between contexts, interpretations, and ways of understanding trauma. But as we know, meanings do not always travel intact across cultures. Sometimes the old meaning is lost in translation, Most times, new meanings are formed. And if we're lucky, the understanding falls somewhere in between. So with that in mind, I'm going to read to you the introduction I sent our panelists right before the weekend for them to digest and think about how they would like to respond as a means of introducing themselves to us and to each other. Over time, the language we use to describe trauma has been shifting. We speak of moral injury, the wound of acting against one's moral code. But more recently, the field has moved towards ideas of identity injury, recognizing that trauma does not only hurt us, it can reshape who we understand ourselves to be. Similarly, resilience has become the dominant lens through which we interpret trauma recovery. Yet the word now stretches across vastly different realities, from a child going back to school after a night of sirens, to a society living through years of ongoing war. Yet used to describe so many things, the word resilience risks meaning less, and perhaps maybe evolving, as has the term moral injury. The scholar George Bonanno, for example, an expert on resilience, suggests that the word flexibility may in fact be better, may better capture how people and communities today adapt when trauma is prolonged, collective, and woven into everyday life. So my question to each of you, as I introduce you one by one, is if resilience may have reached a point of semantic exhaustion, what new language do we need now? What concepts, frameworks, or even new words might better capture what societies actually do or should do in the wake of multi-layered, multi-generational, and collective trauma? Okay. Is this on too? This is yes? So I'm now going to introduce our panelists one by one, and after introducing each of you, we'll ask you to take 3 to 5 minutes, that's the challenge, to answer the question you've been absorbing over the weekend. Beyond the word resilience, what new words or framework can we use today? We'll start with Deborah Abraham. Dr. Abraham Gerard Meyer. Dr. Meyer is the founder and president of the Mental Wellness Society, international chair of the Resilience and Wellbeing Foundation, and the director of ResWell VUCA PTSD, an international collaborative on societal PTSD. He is a psychologist, researcher, and educator, specializing in trauma, resilience, and community mental health. His work focuses on evidence-based interventions for individuals and populations affected by mass trauma, integrating clinical practice with training and program development for professionals in public systems. Now we turn to you for your reply. Beyond the word resilience, what new words or frameworks can we use today?
I think you had a question for me, no? You had a question for me.
This was the question.
Okay, I'm speaking about George Bonanno.
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Number one, I'm very pleased, very honored to be here with you. And I need to say, I'm more than pleased to see that there is an organization doing the work you do, because without you inviting me, I will not be able to speak, and they will not be able to hear me. So thank you for making Oshidur. That's practical. Speaking about George Bonanno, I think we need to put things in perspective. You will tell me when to stop.
I will.
I go and you stop me.
That's my job.
Bonanno wrote what made him famous more than 20 years ago. Many things happened since 20 years ago. So that was before COVID, that was before Facebook, that was before TikTok, which are useful, but they are integrated elements of the society but they are also stressful elements in the society. So we need to reactualize a little bit. As much as I love technology, innovation on the present time, and even the future time, I think we need to look in the past. And in the past, we have an extraordinary example. We have been helping a psychologist in Ukraine not to suffer about a vicarious trauma. And I was very surprised because I was saying, have you read the book of Viktor Frankl? And they all said, you know, when there is an alert, we take that book with us in the shelter. So that's very interesting because we are talking about people and we are talking about somebody who many years ago created something. What was that thing? That thing was, in fact, his book is A Man in Search of Meaning, but that was not that. What he said was, I don't want to let the situation to define who I am. I am who am I. I am who I am. And I am the person who wants to do things. He already knew there that he started to create a new element of psychology. I think he was an example of resilience, as we speak of resilience. So I think it's very important. Another element we change in this society is we all, as researchers and validators, are working with placebo effect. Even some people still question, does placebo exist? Yeah, it exists between 20 and 30% of the case, and thanks God, many people get treated with that. But the problem in this society now is that we move from placebo to nocebo. We don't believe. We believe, I see a lot of PTSD people saying, when you have, is it true that you keep PTSD for life? Well, no. People can have a PTSD, people can have an ADHD, people can be on the spectrum and have a normal life. If they look at a normal life, and if they deal with people who are working as more not looking at the problem, but looking at the solution. And that's a very important element, because if we bring an old solution to a new problem, how do you expect a good solution? And the problem we have is really new. So we'll speak about that in the second part. Yes. But I think it's very important to see that we speak about Georges Bonanno and the memory. Speaking about the memory of, well, when starts our memory? It's not a question of conscious, subconscious. It's not that. Our memory starts as a mammalian in the old brain. And we have reactions which are ingrained in our DNA. We see today that memory flare up on October 7 because many of us are descendants of what we call Holocaust survivor. It's in the DNA. So there is a memory in the DNA. That's in the whole brain, the mammalian brain, flight, freeze, the reaction we have in front of danger. But that reaction does not involve the thinking, the cortex. It involves definitely the reptilian brain and what we don't control, which is a parasympathetic system. So how do we bridge the two? Another memory is in our body. When we have a trauma, the body remembers everything, and it's in the body. That's why some people are talking about psychotherapy, psychosomatic trauma therapy. They are all good. Acupuncture is very good. There is very good acupuncture, there is very bad acupuncture, there is very good psychology, there is not so good psychologists. What is a measuring stick? Measuring stick is the duration of the treatment. And the duration of the treatment is if the psychologist, the practitioner, the teacher, whoever it is, does not have an idea where he takes that person, there will be a problem. Because if you don't know where you go, you will never get there. So it starts by the destination. What is your destination? That was Frankl. His destination was to survive and to become somebody. How many seconds? Done?
3.
Oui, fini?
Seconds.
Fini.
But you'll have a lot more
To
time,
be
I
continued.
promise. I'm going to take that back.
The challenge begins. Timekeeping. We'll go down the row. Next is Dr. Thomas Hubel. Dr. Hubel is an international teacher, facilitator, and author working at the intersection of trauma healing, collective resilience, and contemplative practice. He is known for integrating psychological insight, somatic awareness, and spiritual traditions to address individual and transgenerational trauma, including the long-term impacts of historical violence. Dr. Hubel leads global training programs, large-scale group processes, and dialogues focused on collective healing and social transformation, and advises organizations on trauma-informed leadership and cultural repair. So the question now to you, beyond the word resilience, what new words or frameworks can we use today?
1, 2, yeah. So good morning. And thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation to ICAR, and thank you for your time. I would say I like very much the word fluidity. That's why we call our method IAC fluidity, individual, ancestral, and collective liquefaction. And I will explain why. Because for me, in the last 20 years, when we were working mainly on looking at how collective trauma, and I want to define collective trauma because sometimes collective trauma is being defined as like a historical layer of impact on a society. And I would very much resonate with the memory of the DNA that collective trauma is actually a much bigger system that is not defined by a certain layer in time, but is actually like a very long systemic process that is ingrained in the way we experience our life, our reality. It has different memory levels from DNA to body to our psychological individual experience. And I think that there is sometimes an overemphasis on the subjective experience, which the subjective experience is very important, but for me, looking at working with very large groups, so we work with very large groups, that's why I think also the treatment model for collective trauma impact are actually healing collectives. That's why I liked when ICAR came into life, that the ICAR collective is a collective because collectives are very impactful. And if we combine individual treatments with highly trained professionals and collective competence building, so the trauma treatment is actually a systemic, interdependent process and not a separate individual process. And so in my writing, I write a lot about this principle of like individual separation versus individuation. And so that's why I think resilience is a combination of the individual capacity to stay related to one's agency, the individual capacity to stay related to the challenge, and the intersubjective or interdependent capacity of a system to face the challenge together, like to stay related to the collective challenge. And that obviously is impaired by what you beautifully said before, is that we are not, October 7th is not the first trauma impact. So when October 7th happened, a lot of other processes happened that influence how we respond to October 7th. And we saw it in the news, on the news, we saw it in society, we heard it all the time. So that's why I think resilience as a fluidity, a maturation, and as a systemic capacity to stay related to challenges is like a definition that I like very much. And the other part is that I think that treatment models need to include more collective power. Because I see in our healing collectives that we work with around the world, that these collective spaces, together with individual highly trained therapists, have a lot of power, and you can train individual competence building and collective competence building together. And I think in times like now, when we have such a mass need for treatment, the distribution of the right treatment to the right person, when we have collectives that are more trained, I think is much more efficient and much more timely. So I think that that's definitely one definition of resilience for me. That's it.
Thank you. Next we have Dr. Gabrielle Salfati. Dr. Salfati is a professor of psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, part of the City University of New York system, an internationally recognized expert in investigative psychology. Her research focuses on behavioral crime analysis, offender profiling, and the dynamics of violent crime. Dr. Salfati has collaborated extensively with law enforcement agencies worldwide, developing empirically grounded methods to support criminal investigations, risk assessment, and violence prevention. So we ask the same question to you. Beyond the word resilience, what new words or frameworks can we use today?
Thank you. They're working okay? So I just want to start as well by just thanking the ICAR team for inviting me here. This is a really exciting time. I met the team close to 2 years ago when they were first starting in New York. And I remember having a conversation at the time about the vision that they had. And to be here 2 years later, both in terms of what's happening in Israel and what's happening with ICAR, is an absolute honor, because I really think that we are at a crucial time now where we can move into action. And it's been wonderful to just be here and just meeting so many people. And so I want to take that from that perspective of where we are today and speak about resilience from there. So I've been going around Israel a lot and in other places, and I've been working on, so I've come from a background of law enforcement, but I've been working with first responders for a very long time. And from the angle of protecting the first responders, who are doing some of the most high-stress jobs that are out there, and I think Israelis understand that of more than most places. And when I'm speaking to people about resilience, it's become very clear that it's become a buzzword, you know, and we're lumping it together now with trauma. And whenever we speak about trauma, we speak about resilience. But I think it's important, so I don't want to change the word resilience. I love the word resilience. I love what resilience does. I want to reclaim it. And I want for us to just maybe think about the many things that it means. And I know we have a lot of different people in the audience, and I sort of want to reach out to different people and say different things about how we might want to think about resilience. Resilience is not the same thing as trauma. It's not treatment. Resilience is not meant to treat trauma. What resilience is hopefully able to do is actually mitigate the impact of trauma, because it's a coping skill. And because it's a coping skill, it is something that everybody can learn. And it's something that everybody can learn literally in minutes. It's not something complex. You don't have to be in psychotherapy or in treatment for months and years. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that it is in the grasp of people to have it. And I think that's really, really important. Resilience is prevention. It's about what skills we can give people to have to make them stronger, so that when they are in a difficult situation, anything from daily life to extreme trauma, how can they use those skills to mitigate the impact of that trauma? And so I think it's important to look at it more as a prevention strategy rather than as a treatment strategy, and then thinking about where we go from there and how we then give people these skills. And I think now we're at that time, I think on day 2, when we're looking at how do we actually go forward and try to reach people and give them these skills. Just like ICAR started out with the psychoeducation program, how can we take it one step further from there? And there's a lot of different things that we can do. But the other thing I also wanted to mention that I think is really important is we've talked a lot about how do we reach people? How do we see who has the biggest need. We talked a lot about that yesterday. And so I think we need to think about resilience in the context, a little bit like, you know, this is when I'm coming from my military and policing background, but you know, when you go to a battlefield and you look at who is injured, and you do triage, just like you do triage in a hospital. And I think you need to do the same thing with psychology. You approach people and you do a psychological triage of who actually is in that moment of extreme trauma, and they need that psychologist. From what I've heard, and I think these numbers are coming from ICAR, you have about 1,000 psychologists here in Israel. 400 of them are about to retire very soon. We have a number of psychologists, but they're not necessarily trained in, they're not trauma-informed, all of them. So I think it's important that the people that you do have get the people who need them the most to those who can actually provide the treatment. And then you had, and I think the numbers were, yes, I can't remember if it's 85 or 95 of people have things that have experienced, but then there's no one there. How do we get them? And they don't need necessarily to go into treatment. They need skills. They need to be able to cope. And we can do that in many different ways. And so when we come back to the definition of resilience, really it's about what can we give those people and how can we give those skills to people so that they can actually have, and this is what you were talking about in terms of self-agency, give them the power back to be able to deal. There's nothing people love more and that heals more than people being able to think that they have the belief in themselves and they have the skills to actually get over something. And so I think that we need to think about resilience as a triage thing, from treatment all the way to what can people actually have in their hand. So in a way, I'm reclaiming the word resilience, and but just thinking about, instead of the word, it's what do we do with it? What does it actually mean? How am I doing on time?
Few seconds left.
Few seconds. Okay, I'll keep the rest for the second question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Talia Levanon is the CEO of the Israel Trauma Coalition, where she leads national and international efforts to strengthen trauma preparedness, emergency response, and community resilience. With decades of experience in crisis management and public sector coordination, she has overseen large-scale psychosocial interventions following wars, terrorism, and disasters, and has advised governments and NGOs worldwide on building sustainable trauma-informed systems. Under her leadership, the coalition has trained thousands of professionals and volunteers in resilience and emergency mental health care. So, what new words, if any, might we use for resilience?
The problem with being last is having heard all these wise people speak before me, I also want to begin by thanking Gila and ICAR. I think it's an amazing place to be in. I spoke to you yesterday about reality and the words creating a reality, and the words in our work has changed so much over the years. I began, when we began our work, we spoke of crisis. Nobody spoke of trauma as an entity that covers all our daily lives. And because of that, I think I will not change the word resilience either, because if it creates reality, this is the reality we want to be in. But I believe, and I'm not the only one, that resilience means not only being strong, but it means holding your vulnerability and the understanding that you will be able to cope together. And in one of the discussions you asked, I think, whether what happened to me defines us. I think it does, but also what defines us is how we moved forward, because resilience is not about bouncing back. We will never be the people we were ever. We can bounce forward with the experience, and also with the experience of what it is that we did and what my family did for me and what my community did for me, and am I part of a bigger thing in life, and how it can help me move forward, but also how I can help others move forward. And so the word doesn't, I don't think we should invest a lot of finding a new word for resilience, although it's very tempting. I think we should invest a lot in creating a framework within which we all work with, learning from each other and implementing our work. I do want to say for 1 second something about words, and that is since the 7th of October especially, the mix between mental health and trauma care, which I find also that needs to be discussed, not at the moment, but it needs to be discussed, because we believe that trauma care is not the whole same arena as mental health, and it has different approaches, sometimes different people, and of course, sometimes different clients. But when we speak of frameworks, we've developed, and I'm saying we because it's not everybody in their own way, but we are also part of a bigger thing. We developed a lot of frameworks to work, and I think one of the best frameworks is the work that is being done, a comprehensive framework that includes not only teaching and learning, but also training teams, training organizations, and providing a lot of community work to create community resilience, but a lot of clinical care by trained professionals in trauma. And this, we created, together with the government, the idea of the resilience centers in Israel. We have currently 5 resilience centers in Ukraine with the same model. We created the resilience center in Paris with the same model. And I think that of course I'm biased, but I think that the resilience center holding under one roof the understanding of training the local organization, very attuned to the local culture and to the local scenarios, training teams, training the community, working with the community, and being able to provide direct care creates a system of care that holds the community before, during, and after emergencies.
Thank you, Talia. Okay, I'm now going to ask each of you to elaborate further through your specific lens and expertise before we open the discussion for cross-communication and inspiration. So I'll turn back to you, Dr. Meyer. What are some key mistakes or blind spots Israel should avoid based on your international experience with mass trauma? What approaches may have initially seemed promising, but have now proved to be counterproductive?
5 minutes, this one?
5 minutes, this one.
Oh, plenty.
Just fine.
I think I will come back to resilience for 1 second. And I like, and I believe, with a group of people working on resilience at University of Tel Aviv. We are now 80 scientists in 22 countries. On the resilience, so there is two approaches. One approach says we had a conference and we tried to define resilience. And after 2 days of conference, we could not come up with a common denomination for a common explanation for resilience. Let it be like that, everybody will be happy. That's not my attitude. And I am the second group who said no, because words are important. Actually, word can heal and word can kill. So it's very, very important to have a word, because a word can define my thinking and my action. So I like the definition of the ability to adapt successfully in the face of stress and adversity. It was created in 2013 by Dr. Wu in South Korea. They have to deal quite a lot with their neighbors of North Korea on resilience. The psychological resilience is not limited by bouncing back, like many people think. And that's what we were talking before. It's not to make you back to what you were, because what you were already deficient, because you were made in a way where you were susceptible to have a trauma. So we need to rebuild you better than before. And in fact, we need to be more a functional psychologist, a functional person, to make you function despite your precedent things, which could be the spectrum, which could be anything, which are very big aggravating factor in PTSD. Many people don't pay attention that the aggravated PTSD is mostly due to people who have ADHD or on the spectrum, particularly suicidal. So here we don't look at the comorbidity, We don't look at the situation before. We need to look at the person during his whole life. And we need to understand, and again, there is one way to think, to be problem-oriented. We'll solve the problem of the problem we have today. We'll solve it. This is not good. We need to be solution-oriented. We need to look forward, because problem-oriented is to drive your life looking in the back mirror. And it's what all the patients have. They don't see how they can do better. They see the problem they had. And that problem gives them an anxiety in the future. They are not in the present. They are not looking at the future. So some consider, I am one of them, that resilience is an active exercise of agency. After 4 years of research, we try to look at what brings better resilience. How do we repair people? And from all the possibility, we have found that agency, the sense of agency, was the key to the whole problem, the key to the safe. Because when you rebuild agency, you rebuild or you develop in prevention the internal locus of control. And when you have internal locus of control, you are less susceptible to have a problem. But
1 more minute for this, and then we'll come around.
so, but we live in a time of VUCA. VUCA, for some of you, I will explain more during the break, is VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, what is concerning, I'm sorry? Complexity, thank you. Complexity, which is also ambiguous, and hyperconnectivity. And that is something which came from COVID. Since everybody during COVID have been on the computer, since that we see, and when we make an fMRI of the brain of somebody, we see that when you spend too much time on the screen, part of the brain becomes null. What part of the brain? Part of the brain of social interaction. And when you have a trauma, what do you need to recover? Social interaction. So the mistake people do is to look at the sickness and not to realize that the system is sick. The society is sick. The system, it's not a systemic approach. It's not a sustainable approach. We try to catch up with the problem. So we need to bring technology. Today, we can measure the brain. And we are saying, with a group of friends, that we advocate brain mapping, the same way that mammography became for cancer detection. And technology is not necessarily big. We have here a little ring. We know 14 parameters, particularly for you, you are concerned with HRV. Or this bracelet, Dr. Wallach is showing me his bracelet too. We have the possibility now to use more technology, and I have seen in the past 2 years, an helmet will cost $40,000. Now it's $1,500. We have seen that a lot of technology is coming. In 1 year, there will be maybe 100 of those. In 2 years, there will be 1,000. 3 years, 10,000. I'm sorry. You want me to repeat?
We'll come back to it.
Okay, so what we need is not to make the mistake to continue to try to catch up and patch up, but we advocate for helping Israel to become first in technology innovation for mental health. And we believe that we have all the resource, all the intelligence to do it, if we look at the destination. No mental sickness. Not to cope, but to prevent.
Thank you. I'm going to take this one.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to check time-wise. We started, I think, at 10 after, so, right? We have until 10 after. Yes? Okay. Just checking that as timekeeper. Okay. Back to Dr. Hubel. Addressing intergenerational and collective traumas, both event-specific as well as the systems we are born into. What lessons have you drawn from your global work that is most relevant to our Israel today?
Yeah, maybe I will speak, I keep it short time-wise. For example, like one practical example, we have been working for a few years with a colleague that is the external legal advisor to the government in Rwanda. So she wrote the justice reform for the Rwandan government that is trauma-informed. And for the ones, like just a short introduction into Rwanda, like 94, as you know, there was this genocide, and within 3 months, around 1 million people perished. And so we are now looking at, there was the Truth and Reconciliation process in Rwanda, and we are now looking how to implement like a collective trauma framework for the kind of deeper healing of what Truth and Reconciliation couldn't do. And so the Rwandan government incorporated now a trauma-informed ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution process, to transition again the justice system from kind of an authority force-based like European model to back to a community-based justice model. And through the Gacaca courts, like the justice after the genocide, because there were so many offenders, so you couldn't deal with them in the regular way. So there was a very strong process that is very much rooted in the Rwandan culture, in community-based approaches. And so now, with the implementation, we are now training around 50 people from various ministries in the government in Rwanda, mainly from the Justice Ministry, but also from the Ministry for Women and Youth, because the next generation is showing more severe intergenerational trauma symptoms. So we are training now a key cohort that is then rolling out the whole process in the whole country. And this is really promising. And I think thinking about this, and I think that's why the work of ICAR is important, and the Trauma Coalition, they're coming together in collectives and beginning to implement like an architecture that has individual treatment capacity, but also has the capacity to address the systemic aspect of trauma, and that's often kind of, I don't know, weaker. And so I think if we combine these two and develop these architectures for various countries, we're also working with diplomats we are training diplomats through one of our NGOs that work in crisis areas, also here in the region, on mediating conflict and in other areas in the world. So how to bring collective trauma understanding into diplomacy, into conflict resolution, and into governments around the world, so that we can develop these healing architectures and combine individual and collective treatment. And I think the Rwandan example is there is a lot to learn in Rwanda that I think has similarities, at least. It's not equal to what happens in Israel, but there are lessons learned that we can apply here. So just short.
Thank you. And as we can see, each one of you could answer each of these questions. So again, when we finish this round, we're going to just open it up for you to talk with each other. Okay, Dr. Salfati, what are some effective models for supporting frontline workers who are repeatedly exposed to horrific traumas to prevent burnout and long-term impairment? And what can we draw from these models that can be used to scale in aiding broader wounded communities?
Okay, so we've had several crises. So I'm speaking now coming from the U.S. In terms of what we've seen there, but I think it applies here as well. We had a huge mental health crisis that came to a peak in 2019, where we had more first responders who took their own lives than were killed in duty, 2 or 3 times the level. And we really found ourselves at a place when we had to find, what can we do? Next, after COVID, we had another crisis that happened, and it didn't replace the first crisis, it just added it to it. And that was the burnout crisis. And so a lot of people, when they're talking about burnout, they think about it as stress or as connected to trauma. But actually, burnout is an organizational issue. And it's the impact of people no longer feeling connected to the work that they do. They've lost hope, they're disconnected, and so they leave. So then what you found was that people were leaving their jobs in higher numbers than we have ever seen before in the first responder populations. And what happened was that those who were left had 2 or 3 times the workload, and then had less resistance, and then when you're getting the trauma. So you both have the operational or the job function, and you have the organizational function. So it's now compounded. And this actually, we're seeing the numbers is international. We're seeing exactly the same numbers, where about 60% of the workforce or more, which is twice as much as before COVID, are now in burnout and leaving. So that's huge. So based on that, and I think this applies to here in Israel because all of these numbers are international, we're seeing the same thing. But based on that, I kind of want to piggyback on the image from yesterday that Gila had about the bridge building and the pieces. For those of you who are here, she had pieces of the bridge on the photograph saying, in order to get people who were drowning in the sea back to shore, we had to take these different pieces together and then provide the bridge. I'm a puzzle person. I like the process. I like to build, and frustrated artist. So I want to take that image, and I don't know who we have in the audience, but from my understanding, we have a lot of different people. So based on the work that we've done, I just want to give some key things, because again, I know that I'm challenged on time. But in terms of some of the takeaways, so from the perspective that we built based on different first responder groups coming to us and saying, we have a problem, can you help us? We built resilience programs, put them through large scale, so we put them out, I evaluated some programs that took it out to about 35,000 people, and I built programs that we delivered to 12,000 people several years running. So from the large scale, what did we learn? What worked? What did not work? And so I wanted to sort of talk about the what, who, when, what, how. So that for those of you who are interested in different aspects of that, can take some of those things away with you. So what we need, the first thing that became very clear is that we need to instill programs and be very aware of the cultural context. So when we're talking about first responders, who are they, what do they need, what is the context that they work in? But the one thing that became very clear is we have no baselines. We don't know what the level of illness is, if you want to use that, in different populations. But there's something more that we don't know, which is really crucial. We don't know what the levels of resilience are. We don't know what kind of resilience people have. We don't know what is missing, so we can't plug it in until we know that. So some of the work that we did was trying to find out that. So I would say always at the start of any organization putting something in, just survey them, see what's happening, what do they have. We have I'm happy to share that. We have the surveys that you can send out. Who needs it? It became very clear that people who are going into first responder populations very often come from trauma because they want to help, because they were helped, or they feel that helping is important. But when they come into the organizations, they're taken on when they have a clean bill of health. And what happens is that they get ill during the job. So there's something that happens during the job. And what we found is that there are actually subpopulations and profiles, if that's sort of my profiling background. Who are they, and when can we catch them? And what we found is that everybody starts really well. So that's really when you need to train them, because around the 5 to 10 year mark is when people start committing suicides. So that is your risk group right there. What do they need? So we need to find out what it is that works. Just because we have resilience tools does not mean that that is what they need. We need to match it to the job context. How do we get it? I think this is a really important one that has been completely ignored in the literature. How do we deliver for impact? It is not enough to just deliver training. We need to deliver training in a way that makes the ground underneath people's feet move. It needs to be transformative, and we can learn a lot from the transformative sort of communities that deliver training. And so we need to train our trainers to deliver very differently, so that if they only have 3 hours, which is often what we're given by first responder groups, you have 3 hours to change their lives. That's a tall order. So how do we do that? It is possible, but we need to think very carefully about how we do that. And then the other thing is obviously we need to deliver for scale. And that part of my question was, well, how do you take what you've learned from what you've done to then deliver it to larger populations? It can be done. We delivered training to 12,000 people in the space of a few months. But there's more than that, and this is the piece that is really missing, I find, and something that we really need to think about, and that's the implementation piece and integration. We go in and we train people for 3 hours and then we walk away. It's not enough. We need to follow them through for months afterwards and teach them how to integrate it into their lives. And we have tried a whole bunch of different things, some which worked okay, others which worked much better. And there's another piece to that, is that we can train people on things, but if they don't use it, then it doesn't really matter. So we need to find out what they actually like and what is actually useful and in what situations they use it. And then, because I do want us to keep us on time, the last thing then, we then need to find out, did it have an impact? And that is the piece when you're looking at the literature. So we did a lot of reviews. We looked at every single study that was ever written on resilience and the impact it's had on first responders. And the one thing that's missing is that people don't test to see whether there was any impact of that training. And so we really need to integrate that. So we need to do before and after. And it is not difficult to do. You've delivered the training, you test it before, you go in 3 months after, 6 months after, you test it again. It doesn't take a lot of effort as long as you have the systems in place. And all of these pieces are the pieces of that bridge. If we can connect them, we can get people to the shore.
And Talia, you can answer this any way you'd like. I know there's so many angles to this. How can we balance collective and historical remembrances without being defined by trauma? Where do you see the role of narrative memory and public acknowledgement in our process of long-term healing?
Wow. I began my work in 1973. I was an officer in the Israeli army, and I was working with bereaved families. And I am a great believer in the strength of the human spirit. It's been instilled in me and is still going with me. And so when we talk about the work that needs to be done with individuals and communities, there is this expression, don't do for us without us, that is not used enough. And people come in to communities or to individuals and say, we know what's good for you. I have this training that is amazing. I know what happened. I understand what you're feeling and so on. And so I believe, and I think we all said this, that in our work, we first of all need to understand where the person or the community is at, what they went through, and trauma is very, very individual. Even though it's collective, it's very individual, and you need to understand before you go in. And so much needs to be done, but first there is a learning process that needs to be done, and Nir Oz is very different from Kfar Aza, very different from Tel Aviv, very different from the north. You really need to put an effort. Having said that, I will also say that we've worked for many years in learning and understanding trauma, and the 7th of October is a different experience for all of us. We were all affected, we are all injured, we are all struggling. I think it's the first time that the personal and the professional have come so much together. It was very difficult to be only a professional or only mother of soldiers and so on, because for all of us, we shared a reality that was very difficult. And again, when we are struggling with creating resilience for people who are affected, we need to understand this in order to move forward, because it's a different people, it's a different country than it was before that. And when we look at our work, as was said here before, we need to look at, I believe, at a model that is a funnel model. You begin by psychoeducation, providing understanding to anybody, a young child, a mother, an elderly, an Arab, an ultra-Orthodox Jew, according to their understanding. They all need to better understand what trauma looks like, how it affects me as a mother, how it affects me as a nurse, whatever. When you provide psychoeducation to people, they will deal better, because they will understand what happens to them, to their body, to their role, whatever the role is. The next phase is creating training, as was said here, to everybody. My mother used to say, if it moves, clean it. If it stands, no, the other way around. If it moves, feed it. If it stands, clean it. So we say, if it moves, train it. We need to train young children to be able to help their peers in the kindergarten, to blow a candle if they are stressed, and we need to train security officers and nurses in the hospitals and so on. Training makes people feel, even if they don't have a professional role, that they can cope. And the next phase is having hotlines available, accessible, that are trained in trauma and can help people with first emotional aid. People will turn into the hotline and call, and they will receive first emotional aid. They will be able to cope better, but of course, if they can't, they will be referred to places where they can receive help. And the last end of the funnel
Speaking here.
is the idea of having trained professionals that are trained in trauma. We have a challenge with children's psychologists, with children's psychiatrists. We have a trauma with people who are able to help in clinics throughout the country. And of course, I will respond to what Eyal said before. In the Resilience Center, the waiting line is not 6 months, it's not even a month. The Resilience Centers offer an accessible service that is specializing in trauma and also specializing in resilience, holding these two together and helping people move forward. I see your stress, so I'm stopping. I'm
You see my
social
stress.
worker.
You're clearly trauma trained. That you saw how traumatized I was when I looked at the clock and thought we had another 10 minutes. So clearly this conversation has just begun. My favorite part of meeting this panel, we all just met this morning for the first time over coffee, was the free-flowing cross-communication. So I'm just going to open it up now because each one of you could have answered each of these questions. To have a chance, if you'd like to reflect on something you didn't have time to say. And yes, I'll be timekeeper. We have 2 minutes.
How many minutes?
We just have a couple minutes left, unfortunately.
Thank you. One element we did not spoke today, which I think is very important for recovery and for what we try to achieve together. As professionals, we have rules of ethics. And we observe the rule of ethics. But in the situation we have, we need to move from ethics to something which is a little bit different, which is integrity. And you can have a lot of ethics as a therapist or anyone, and a low integrity. And integrity is to ask the question, is what I am doing efficient? Is what I am doing a result? Because you can have a lot of ethics, but if you don't show integrity to your client, it's a second trauma because they feel betrayed. And I think this is something, a movement. We started to work as a group internationally to say we need to bring standard in the field of integrity, because to hear that somebody is in therapy for 20 years, there is something wrong. That it takes 20 sessions of EMDR. No, there is gradation. Maybe we need to organize EMDR at a certain time, another modality another time, another modality. So we need to follow up people, and for that we need technology to be able to collect data and be able to follow those things.
Thank you. Any last words, language, translations? Flow.
I have much to say, but I will end with a quote, if it's okay with you.
Wonderful.
No matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. Albert Camus.
That's a beautiful place to end. Thank you all so much. It's such a pleasure to work with you, meet you, and I hope we continue the conversation throughout the day.
And thank you so much to our wonderful moderator who did such a good job keeping us in line and on time.
All right.